Welcome to the Impact Marketing Podcast, the show that's all about building a leaner, meaner, better product and selling more of it. Just like you, we're grinding it out every day, all day, and we're here to bring you battle-tested marketing strategies and stories from the front lines of building small businesses on a shoestring budget. Go to impactpodcast.com to find links to all our episodes and show notes and join the discussion with other listeners. This week we're talking about the year 2014. This is my retrospective of the year 2014, where we take a look back at the most important lessons learned in what has been the most successful year in our business so far, by quite a wide margin. This has been an amazingly productive and a good year for our business. So let's get right into it. I'm your host, Shane Malach, and with me is Paul McCarthy. Once again. Hey, Paul.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's get started. Yeah, as I just said, 2014 was an amazingly successful year for us, for our business. I think on pretty much every metric you can measure, we've done really well. We've generated more sales, more revenue, more traffic, more everything. It's been almost shockingly good. And if you want to know what I mean by almost shockingly good, you can see I'll link to some earlier podcasts where we talked about a launch we did early in the year that was so successful. We actually got really overwhelmed with new customers and members, and it was actually pretty hard on us. I mean, I think we both scraped past a nervous breakdown by only a small margin there.
Yeah, that's the worst I've ever seen you.
Yeah,
sure.
So yeah, it was almost traumatizingly good, but for the business it really was amazingly good. And I also noticed that apart from just yay more money or whatever, it was really the transformation there was really significant. I think more than any year before, I've really noticed things changing, and two things that I look out for. I mean, one of the things that's obviously important to me as well is the usual business metrics, like I just said, more revenue, more traffic, that kind of thing. The other thing that's always very high on my list of priorities is skills. I want to see that we're getting better at what we're doing year over year. And I think that also we've made more progress this year than any year before. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a result of us maneuvering ourselves so that we're not actually the linchpins of the business anymore.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of once you get to a point where you're not limited by your own effort, because you only have a certain amount of hours that you can put into any one thing. When you're not limited by that and you start getting other skilled people, in many cases people that are better than you, and being able to bring them into the business and contribute, that's when I really noticed that our business started to rapidly get better in many ways. Just even just in edge case, in areas of the site, for instance, whereby before we just didn't even have the time to even look at it. Now these areas are really starting to pick up, and I'm seeing improvements in just basically all facets of the business.
Yeah. So I think two things we should talk about is, first of all, some of the lessons we've learned from this change, and then also about how to make this kind of thing happen. Because I think one of the challenges is actually making that jump from being a solopreneur to scaling that business past the point where you can just scale it yourself, right? But I want to talk first about some of the biggest insights that I've gotten out of this year. And one of the thing that I want to start with is I want to get back to the one thing that I've mentioned the most on I'm Impact, which is what I call the grind, which is the very simple idea that what matters most for whatever you want to accomplish, what matters most is the skills you can bring to bear. And the great news about that is that you can simply work on those skills to get better at them. And I call it the grind because building your skills, and especially building your skills quickly, is not a very pleasant process. It's it's quite difficult. You will encounter all these obstacles, and you have to, grit your teeth and grind through it to get better at it. And this is like the basic. I sometimes say this is the only thing I know about life, right? The only thing I know about life is that the grind works. And this year and the process we've made this year is another confirmation of that. It's another example of how that works because, as the business started growing really fast, we were thrown into a lot of new situations. We had to deal with a lot of new things. First time where we suddenly have to manage a large team, large. I say large. We're about 15 people now. First time where we're starting to develop things with just a lot more complexity, many more steps to the process, right? When I started out building products, I built information products, and I literally did all the work myself. So it was just me sitting down working until everything's done. Now we have there's so many phases that stuff goes through. It starts with an idea, then we do documentation, then we do mock-ups, then it goes to a designer, then it goes to front-end developers, then it goes to back-end developers, and so on, right? It's like so many more layers of complexity that we suddenly had to deal with. And as usual, in the beginning, we were really bad at this, and we were not getting a lot of work done. We were paying a lot of money to add team members, to add more developers, and so on, but we didn't really do a good job of getting a good return on investment on that. But we knew that this is simply a matter of practice, right? We knew that this is simply something we have to get better at this. And so we applied this principle. You just work at it every day, and you make a conscious effort to try and improve the systems and processes and your skills every day. And I think that's one of the greatest things we saw, is just how we went from being this chaotic, disorganized group of people trying to get something done, to where we are now, where we have a great team doing really good work. Where, I mean, if you look at the amount of value in products developed we get out of, let's say, a day's worth of our team's work today, versus half a year ago, it's a huge difference now, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it might be worth adding some perspective as to where we were at the start of this year to where we are now, because this whole 15 team member thing, that's quite a new development.
Yeah.
I think at the start of this year, I mean, this seems longer than a year ago to me, I have to say,
Yeah.
when I look back. But at the start of this year, I think I'm right in saying that there was just you, myself, we had two developers, and we had a couple of support staff.
Exactly.
And that was before really Thrive Themes had opened up. So that's our latest project, Thrive Themes. So we went from that position there, where it's a relatively small team, it's very easy to manage, just four of us.
Yeah.
Just on Skype in one group, and you don't need so many processes at that level. But now our whole business is built on process and systems that if you took those away, I don't know where we'd be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a good point, because I think that's one of the painful things, and that's what, like I said, at the beginning, we sucked at this, because there's a certain point of transition from I think you can just call it from solopreneur to like teamwork, where even if you have 3 or 4 people, it's still the same things that worked for you as a solopreneur still work for a group of up to 3 or 4 people, because it's still kind of everyone's a bit responsible for everything. And it like you say, it just doesn't, you don't need a lot of systems or whatever to communicate with a group of 4 people. But then you get to some threshold where that just stops working. The idea that, everybody is responsible for everything and everybody knows everything, it just doesn't work anymore. And the transition there, I think, is one of the challenges that I think every growing business will face at some point.
Yeah, that's something that took us a while, I have to say, and especially for me, to let go of stuff.
Yes.
I really suck at letting go of stuff, because I just feel like I know how I want it done, and I can't very easily articulate that always to other people. So I just want to, no, I'll do it. But it gets to the point where you realize you just can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and I'm the same. And I think this is another risk for the solopreneur where you have this whole, it's like, I mean, I think I had this very, very strongly. So one of the big changes for me was a change in outlook or a change in mindset where, I used to be this bootstrapping guy, and this was almost like part of my DNA. And I remember, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, and I remember quite distinctly the moment before I started creating my first product. I remember looking at the market of products, at the time, information products, and just looking at what other people are doing, what they're selling, how they're selling it, what they're selling it for, and so on. And just looking at that and saying, okay, I can outwork all of you guys. I can do a better job than my competitors simply because I will have this willingness to work harder and longer and smarter than anyone else. I'm just willing to basically say that I'm just this huge boulder here. I'm just going to push this huge boulder up this mountain all by myself, right? And I'm willing to push a larger boulder up a higher mountain, and that's my business advantage. And this is a great skill to have, right? This is grit, essentially, right? This is grit. It's a great quality to have, especially when you're starting out. But the problem is, I think I got too attached to that. Like I said, it became like part of my personality. I'm this guy. I'm this guy who's just willing to push this huge boulder up this huge mountain. Look at me, right? And there comes a point where that's just, there's no point in doing that anymore. It's like we have a team of people with trucks and diggers and whatnot, and it doesn't matter how big the boulder is that I can push up a mountain. Like it's not helping the business anymore in a significant way if I just do that. And you have to get to the point where you say, okay, that's not my job anymore. I'm not that guy anymore. And I have to be. And for me, it also, only recently I've actually gotten to the point where I can say, I don't want to be that guy anymore. I don't want that to be my thing anymore. Right? I'd rather be, I'd rather be a part of a larger team, doing whatever it is that I can contribute, rather than being having to be the person who has control of everything and always does everything and so on. But that was very difficult for me. I mean, that basically took all year for me to learn to let go of that.
Yeah, as an insider, I can testify this. I mean, it's literally just this week you were like, you know what, I've got to change your mindset. So yeah, that literally has taken you all year, and yeah, be interesting to see what happens in the next 6 months with this new mindset.
Yeah, yeah. But that's and I think that the underlying principle here is that you get to a point, and this is very difficult, but you get to a point where you have to realize that what got you from 0 to here won't take you from here to there, right? And I think there might even be a book or something that's called that, or about this topic. But yeah, you get to a point in your growth where you can't just do more of what you've been doing so far. And certainly, this is something where we could and might talk about this in more detail in future episodes about what kind of systems we set up and so on. But I think really the key point is this transition, is recognizing, okay, this is happening, and like being wise enough to be able to let go of the old stuff, of the old methods and the old outlooks that got you to that point. And and as I said, like this whole idea of being this solopreneur, being the bootstrapper, doing all this work yourself, having all this grit, that stuff is great. I'm not saying I wish I'd never done that. That was necessary for us to get to the point where we were. I mean, we for a time it was just the two of us working, and we both did that kind of thing. If we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have Thrive Themes now. So that's really important. But yeah, it's just something that it's great to get a business off the ground. And also, you don't really have to scale past that point. I mean, I think you can quite comfortably have a business that brings in probably 6 figures a year, and just be doing that by yourself, and just be the guy who pushes the boulder up the mountain, right? And you don't necessarily have to scale past that point, but in our case, we really want to. And so
Yeah.
this change of mindset was really necessary.
Yeah, I think if you have a similar outlook to us, whereby we want to build bigger and bigger brands each time we take on a new project, we really want to push ourselves to the next level and keep on developing our skills, then I think a great formula to start with, if you have nothing and you're trying to get off the ground, is basically the grind, hard work, and being pretty good with money. So when
Yeah.
you actually make some money, you don't just go and blow it
Yeah. Yeah.
like some rapper, and instead you you take that money and reinvest it into the business. And those are the two main things that we did, I think, over the last 2 or 3 years to get to where we are now. I mean, there's a whole host of other things as well, but
Yeah, but in terms of outlook, in terms of that kind of thing, yeah, those are the main points for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, apart from that, I'm also curious, like from your side of the, yeah, just from your perspective, what was like the biggest change that you noticed this year?
This year we did a whole lot of learning with regards to we learned a new process methodology. What is it? Well, it's Scrum, isn't it? That's the
Yeah,
name, right? Yeah. So we started to incorporate Scrum into our business, and that was a major change for us. We never had anything like that before. And this is kind of going into more detail about what you said before. But Scrum is like a methodology that's been put together by people a lot smarter than us who've done this for a lot longer than us and have realized that at some point there needs to be a lot more structure when it comes to software development and getting things done. And it basically comprises of a workflow management tool and a project management tool kind of in one, and you have stand-up meetings every morning, and there's just a whole process, a set of rules that you should follow so that you can develop stuff faster and better. And we never had anything like that before. I mean, our process was let's Skype each other and make decisions on the spot.
yeah,
But when we suddenly found ourselves, because this launch earlier in February, we took in a lot of money, and we wanted to reinvest that. So we suddenly found ourselves in a position where we just didn't have a clue what we were doing, with a load of people looking up to us
yeah,
for decision making and process and stuff like that. And we were very lucky because we actually ended up working with a bunch of people that had already done this before and introduced us to Scrum. And I think we hit the ground running partly because of that.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think our own learning curve on that would have been a lot longer otherwise. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think we would be anywhere near where we are now if it wasn't for the knowledge that was passed on to us through that.
yeah, yeah,
But really, it was just the our transformation of business process is it's been massive this year. It's just I hardly hear from you during the day now. It's
yeah,
like you cut off your Skype, you know what you're doing, I know what I'm doing, and that's it. And then each morning we have the stand up, and it's a lot it's a lot more structured. And yeah, we've definitely gone through a big growth phase in that regard.
yeah. And I think another thing is that, or very closely related to that, actually, I think in general the trend is just that we have more and more like just systemization. I don't know if that's a word, but you know what I mean. We use more and more systems, or we turn processes into clear systems more and more. Because if you just look at if you look at like each individual product that we develop, as in each new theme or new plugin or new major feature set, like every time we do that, it gets a bit more strict in a way. And because if you look at how we are going about this latest plugin that we're working on now, again, it's like miles ahead of what we did before. And we spent so much more time here on doing the planning and getting like the initial stages and the system right. And it's really paying off in a big way. And I think it's an interesting thing to experience. And I wonder if we're going to encounter any issues with that, because on the one hand, typically if you think about, we have these, very strict rules and systems by which we develop something, that sounds very corporate, right? That sounds like you're in this stifling corporate environment where everything has to be by the book. And I wonder if we're going to run into any issues with that, later on, where it kind of hinders creativity or something. But the trend right now in our business is that definitely more systems are better. Like the more we do that, the better our results tend to be.
Yeah, I think we're in quite a good position company size right now because we can still pivot if we hear customer feedback, and we do that a lot. We monitor the blog and the forums, and we look for new features, and we can pivot really fast still.
Yeah.
Just 2 weeks we can have new features developed, and we, like I say, we do that a lot. I don't think many companies that are big have the ability to do that because of all the bureaucracy and nonsense that comes with having a big company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think you have to find a balance. And I mean, as long as that's another really important point, especially for software development. I think that's, a huge advantage we have is just how short our cycle time is, and I think it's something that also wows our customers often, just how quickly we can, you know, turn something into more of the product that they wanted and asked for.
Yeah, and the challenge is going to be keeping that going
Yeah.
as we take on more and more projects. And we have some more learning to do there, I think, because I think we need a bunch of sub teams
Hmm.
that are running in parallel with each other, working on projects, and we need product owners in each of these sub teams. It's going to be an interesting challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, another thing that this reminds me of is that another way in which my outlook has changed is has to do with the 80-20 principle or the Pareto principle, right? So I'm sure you're familiar with that, right? In general, you have really what the 80-20 principle says. The typical example is that the top 20% of wealthy people have 80% of the money in a society, right? And usually it's skewed even more than that. But really the point is that whenever you look at almost anything, if you look at the distribution of almost anything among a population, then you always have a power curve, right? It's not a linear curve or it's not a flat line. It's a power curve where the ones at the top have the most, the ones at the bottom have the least, completely disproportionately to each other. And this is also true, and this is also something that I've started thinking about this more lately. This is also very true for skills. Okay, so where I think the change that I have now is that I much more look at the potential, like the total amount of work that you or your team can get done in any given, in an hour or in a day or something, can be has an extremely high variance depending on how well everybody's working at their own, at their own best skill set, and how well that's. So basically, if you look at different things that I could be doing in the business, there's also a power curve of my skills, right? So there are certain things that I'm really, really bad at that I can still do, but it will take me hours and hours to do a mediocre job. And there are certain things that I'm disproportionately good at where I can do an extremely good job in relatively little time. And so one of the ways I've started thinking about this is that everybody has this, right? Every person on the team has this. They have certain things they're really bad at, certain things they're disproportionately good at. And the better a job you do of making sure that everybody is working in that narrow band of skills where they're excellent, the more efficient your company is. And it's not just, I think that the really interesting thing about this is that it's not just if you do a better job at this, your company can be 20% more productive. It's more like if you do a better job at this, your company can be 15 times more productive, right? It's that kind of, that's how strongly it's skewed. And so that's something I've been thinking about more. And also in terms of my own skills. So, before, my outlook was basically anything that needs doing in the business, I'm going to do. And if I'm not good at it yet, I'm going to grind it out until I'm good enough at it. But now my outlook is more to be much more selective. So instead of spending time working on a skill where I'm actually not very good and I have to do all this grinding to get decent at it, I would rather find someone to delegate that to and spend more of my time refining the skills that I'm already extremely good at. Because there's also just a far greater return on investment there, right? It's much more valuable for me to be, if you're a decent marketer and you also have these 5 other skills that you're also decent at and you're grinding all of them, that's a lot less valuable than if you're like the idiot savant, right? If you're the best marketer in the world and that's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, and to give a practical example of this, up until I think somewhere around October this year, you had pretty much been completely indulged in product.
Hmm.
and building out the product and making sure the product is better and specifications. And at one point, you were like our main tester and all sorts.
Hmm.
And if you actually look at the bottom line during those times, we were okay. We were doing all right. But ever since we really decided, hold on, we need to put you where you generate the most benefit for the company, which is essentially selling and marketing and doing that kind of cool stuff. Ever since then, I mean, we opened up our sales pages. You started doing some blog posts more than you used to do, and ever since then, our business has really taken off in terms of bottom line growth.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I
it's
think it pretty much doubled our revenue the first month I started doing that.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
Yeah, which is
exactly. And I think at the time as well, you felt like you couldn't remove yourself from the
yeah,
product. And the thing is, we had a meeting once about this, I think, and I'm quite sure within a month you were back in product again. And then we had another meeting. We were like, no, listen, this just has to happen. You're like a
yeah,
heroin addict. We need to basically chain you up and keep you away from product so you can do marketing.
yeah.
Yeah. And that finally, the cold turkey, it's what got you out of the product finally. And now it's like I'm allergic. Every time I hear you're doing some testing or something like that, I practically explode. I'm like, oh no, you're going back to product again.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know the effect that has on the business.
Yeah, it's true. And this is the problem, right? When you're looking at it, when you're looking at it as a linear distribution, you're saying, okay, I have this many hours in the day, and I have to spend some hours doing this and some hours doing that, and I don't have enough time for marketing. But if you look at the potential output, what I'm really saying is I'm spending all of my day to add 10% to the business instead of spending all of my day to double our revenue, right? And so which is more valuable? Which is more valuable if I make sure that the products get finished a bit sooner because I'm doing the testing, or if we get twice as much money?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and that's really the thing that that's the mistake I made, and where I now see that that's kind of stupid. It's not, you can't just compare, you can't just use hours as a baseline. You can't just say, well, I'm spending these hours doing this. The question is, on this power curve, how much output are you producing? And that's where I was wasting a lot of my time. And it feels like it's very easy for it to feel like, well, I have to do this, right? We can't afford we don't have a tester right now, so I have to do this testing. We can't afford a tester. Well, we bloody well could if I was spending my time where I should, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's always easy to feel like, oh, but I can't, and you
Yeah,
somehow come up with some kind of reason why, but actually you just have to kind of do it.
yeah,
We knew there was a void there, you had to fill it, and as soon as you did start filling it, the company did really show. And like you said, we were able to take on another tester because of that extra output. Kind of ties on with the other point I wanted to raise is something I've really also noticed as the company has grown is that it's so much easier if you have somebody who's 100% intent on fulfilling what the user wants and somebody who's tech. So the marketing and tech combination has worked so well for us. And now even more so than ever, I think, because you'll come to me with an idea and what's really important is that you don't have any kind of technical constraints in your mind. You don't know how it's going to be built. You don't care. You just want something that the user is going to love and you think is going to sell like hotcakes.
yeah.
And you come to me and I'm the tech guy and I basically tell you it can't be done. And then we go and build it anyway. As
Exactly.
is the case with Thrive Content Builder.
Yes.
You came to me and said, I want a live front-end editor for WordPress and I want it to not have any loading times or anything. I was like, no, can't be done.
Yeah, and this is actually, I have to say, we made a mistake there, because I have too much technical stuff in my brain already. Not that I understand any of it, but I have too much of a feeling of, well, basically when I think about products now, and I have to untrain that again. There's too much of me thinking, well, but is that actually possible, or does this work? Do we need to use Ajax for this? I actually think stuff like that sometimes, and I shouldn't. I should not be thinking that, right? So
Yeah.
I think we made a bit of a mistake there, where perhaps, yeah, I wasn't removed enough from the technical side, because I think, like you say, ideally, I should just be the user advocate. I should just say, look, the perfect product from the user's perspective, and this is important, right, for software products. the user does not care. The user does not care whether the technology behind the thing they're using is complicated or easy, or whether it's JavaScript or Ajax or any of that. They don't care. They don't care. They don't even understand it if you try to explain it to them in most cases, right? And so I think it's very important to have someone who's just a user advocate who just says, look, this here would be the perfect end user experience. So let's build that. And I don't want to know anything about the technology. Just figure it out. And if there's really something that's completely impossible, then maybe we can start looking for alternatives. But yeah, I think that's something that we can still improve on. And I also want to actually cut in there and also say, we're talking about software here, but the same principle, the same basic principle applies to information products and service-based products and so on. The principle is simply that all your user cares about, or all your customer cares about, is the end result, right? So, let's say you're a designer, you're like a design service. The customer doesn't care about what technology you use to create the design, doesn't care about whether it takes you a long time or not to create that design. None of that matters. Like, if I order a logo from you and you deliver a great logo, that's what matters. Nothing else matters. Whether that is the result of a huge complicated process, or whether you have some, I don't know, semi-automated way to make amazing logos, I don't care. All I want is an amazing logo, right? And I think that's something that does well to keep in mind. And yet, what's worked for us is having that separation, where someone's responsible only for the user side and someone's responsible only for the technology.
Yeah. And from a tech perspective, if you let a tech person go on a rampage on a project, you'll basically find most of the time that they'll spend all their time working on something that they feel is really cool, really cutting edge, that the user won't even care about, like you said, I remember one of my projects before we started working together, I built a membership site, and I think I did something cool with affiliates whereby if they made a sale in ClickBank, then it would automatically update on a leaderboard or something, and it made going through a ClickBank API and stuff like that. I must have wasted 3 days on this nonsense. It didn't do anything for our bottom line. It was just a complete waste of my time because I was a tech person and I didn't have somebody there to say, come on. The user doesn't give a crap about this stuff.
Yeah. It's like, if you don't add it, nobody will ever ask about it.
Yeah. I see this a lot actually. I see, especially sometimes even in the forums, whereby I see somebody has a product and they're spending an inordinate amount of time working on something that's just not going to give them any kind of extra in their bottom line. It's just something they've got in their head that they want it in a certain way, and they spend a whole lot of time because they're a tech trying to make it happen.
Yeah. I think this is part of the. This comes with the territory, right? This is one of the dangers of the territory of online business, is that it's very easy to get distracted with these, whatever it is, like with little widgets, with little technical things. Because even if you yourself aren't a programmer or anything like that, you can find all these, these services, these plugins, these widgets that add something to your website, and it's quite easy to kind of follow that down a rabbit hole and go, oh, but what if I made this thing pop up over here like that and integrate with, geo-tagging and I don't know, where in the end it's just like, hold on a second, all you need is like a page, a message, and a button, and start selling your thing, right? Forget about all this other stuff for now. And so I think that's just part of the risk of having all this, having all these cool features and all these tools you can use. You can you can get much too close to it and lose sight of what really matters. So this is actually a great segue to another thing I wanted to talk about, which is rapid implementation. So even in the year before, we talked quite a lot about like the lean approach and creating minimum viable products. And this is something that I'm doing more now than I used to, and I guess I also preach more now than I used to, because. And I'm starting to call it rapid implementation now, because it's more than just about creating a minimum viable product of something. It's about the general principle of rapidly implementing and shipping stuff. And that doesn't just apply to a product, it applies to anything, right? It applies to your content, it applies to your business ideas. it applies to almost any kind of output you have. Because I've just noticed, I think the reason this has become so important to me is that I've noticed the gap of anything where you say, I'm going to do this later. The gap between the present and the point where you actually do it is almost always infinite. So I've just noticed that there's this huge danger in thinking, oh, I'm not quite ready for this yet, I'll do this later. And that's why the idea of rapid implementation has become so important to me. And the idea is simply this, that, if there's something that needs doing, do whichever part of it you can do right now, do that and publish it. So instead of thinking, oh, I have to have, the perfect setup here before I can do this, and I have to have this membership setup and this special feature and this and that before I can start, I don't know, getting people's email address. What I'm saying now is basically what you should do right now. If you want to build a mailing list, what you should do right now is put the simplest, ugliest sign up form on your site somewhere and just say sign up here. And that is the furthest you can be from having an optimized opt-in process. But the point is you can have it in 2 minutes from now. And you can start getting a couple of email addresses. And then you build from there. And then you go, okay, so now I'm going to improve this sign-up form. And now I'm going to build a nice, opt-in incentive. And now I'm going to build a funnel and so on. But instead of saying I have to have this perfect funnel and this awesome opt-in incentive and an upsell and all kinds of stuff in place before I'm going to get the first email address, what you say is, I'm just going to do the simplest, quickest step towards building an email list right now. And that's something that I think, that's something that has become more important to me and something that I apply to more areas of my life now than I used to.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. You didn't announce that to me, but now you're talking about it. I have noticed that you used to be massively perfectionist about every small detail.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started doing this whole lean startup methodology thing where we'd launch as early as possible, and you kind of drop some of it there. And now it's like, let's get stuff done, which is good. I'm wondering if we should just, for the last part of this podcast, just have a chat about a few mistakes we made over the last year. It might be an interesting conversation to have.
Yes, you start.
So yeah, okay. So one of the things I was thinking, I don't know if this was a mistake or if we just dropped the ball here or what happened. I mean, so maybe we should discuss this. So in February we did this huge launch, and I don't know exactly what it was, but it was quite, for us, we were astounded. Then we did another launch again, and that was in August, I think. It was in August, and that one didn't go quite so well.
No.
And we have a few theories about why this didn't go quite so well. And one of them is that this whole lean startup MVP process, whereby you basically build something as simple as possible that people will like and will actually buy, to get it out there as soon as you can, and then you rapidly evolve it. Well, I think we did this with our content builder product, when we added the landing pages feature. Now, the question is, we took that to market with 5 landing pages. So let's discuss. Do you think that was why the launch didn't go quite so well? Do you think it was because we launched during a period whereby so many other competitors were launching, or do you think it's a combination of the two, or maybe there's something else? What do you think?
I think that I can imagine that, the fact that we had a small number of landing pages when we launched this certainly contributed to the problem. I'm sure that if we launched with 30 or 50 or 100 templates, that would have increased our conversions, but not to the point. I mean, the launch was bad to the point where we can't just attribute it to that. I doubt that makes so much of a difference. So I think an important factor here was that we didn't. I think it was the marketing and product side problem was the biggest factor here. And one of the reasons this happened was that I had planned something like 4 weeks for marketing this, and in the 4 weeks leading up to the launch, I had all kinds of stuff happened. I had to fly back to Switzerland because my grandmother was very ill and she passed away. And then on my way back, My car broke down, and just like, I mean, there was just an absurd series of things going wrong in those weeks. Where, you know, it's like the launch curse, right? We've talked about this before. Like before you launch, everything goes wrong. But this was like the extremist example of the launch curse, where just there was such a long series of stuff going wrong that in the end, I had almost no time to do any marketing for this product, and
Yeah.
that was definitely a problem. But it's I can't just attribute this to a lot of stuff going wrong, because, like, you know, like I say, that tends to always happen, right? Whenever you launch something, it tends to just accumulate all these problems right before the launch. But I think the issue happened before that, because I was just spending too much time on the product side to begin with, right? I should have the idea that I'm going to spend four weeks doing some marketing for a product is the wrong idea. I should be spending all my time doing marketing, so that even if stuff goes wrong, it's not such a big issue. So I think that the biggest problem we had there was that, you know, I in the end, I think it was literally about 4 or 5 days to create all the sales material, the affiliate stuff, everything,
Yeah.
and that's just not enough.
Yeah. Which kind of brings us on to another point whereby we've expanded our product side of the business massively. We now have, I don't know, I don't have an exact head count, but basically you're the only marketing guy. And
Yeah,
every now and then I jump in with a post, like
yeah,
once a year or something, give a guest appearance. So we've got, 15, 16 people on product and then you on marketing.
yeah,
Maybe one of our mistakes was that we didn't focus our development earlier on in the year to bring on another marketing team member to
yeah.
then expand the product range and do it like that. Whereas now we have this point where, well, actually we probably need about 3 or 4 marketing team members for you to build a marketing team for us to get up to speed on the marketing side.
I think it's definitely a mistake that we have such a huge discrepancy between the marketing and the product side. On the other hand, there is a certain the reason this is happening is because of how obsessed we are with making the best possible product. Like this is, and I think this is, you know, it's a very real thing in our company, for certainly for the two of us, but also for the people who are working on these products. We have this, like we have this obsession with just wanting to make the perfect product, and it's also, this has always been part of the marketing strategy that we use, is that we build something that is way better, right? That the idea is that you, like I've said about the content builder, for me the ideal customer is someone who's tried 3 to 5 other visual editors for WordPress, and then uses the content builder. Because if if this is the first visual editor you try, you'll just think, well, okay, this stuff, this is nice, but here's something that doesn't work quite the way I want. Whereas if you've tried some of our competitors and you switch to content builder, you're like, oh my God, this is a million times better. So an important part of our marketing strategy is that we build products that are like deliberately outpacing the competition very significantly. And so, I mean, that's basically, that's my diagnosis of what caused this issue. And that's not a bad thing. That's not something we should change. But yes, definitely next year. I mean, one of my goals is to build a proper marketing team for this company for next year.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to have this podcast next year
Yeah.
to see how much of an effect that's had, because I think it's going to be quite sizable.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's another thing where, if you look at the size of the market, I mean, we're selling WordPress themes and plugins. If you look at the size of that market, even though Thrive Themes is very successful, and like I said, I mean, there's not much, we can't really complain about how it's gone. The size of the slice of this pie that we have is, it doesn't exist yet. We have a 2-dimensional slice of that pie. So, and that's where a marketing team comes in, because at a certain point, right, it's the build it and they will come problem. I mean, it doesn't matter how good our products are. At a certain point, you just have to have this marketing power to make sure people know about it. And yeah, if we want to go from the kind of growth we've had this year to actually starting to stomp around in this market properly, we'll need some proper marketing for that for sure.
Right. Yeah.
All right. I think we're actually running kind of long. So I think at this point we can wrap it up. Is there anything else you wanted to throw into this before we finish?
I don't think so. No, I think we covered it pretty good.
All right. So that is our look back at the year 2014 and all of the craziness that has happened. Maybe one final comment that came to mind when I was thinking about topics I wanted to talk about in this podcast episode is that, one thing is for sure, if you become an entrepreneur, if you take the leap and start doing this, one thing's for sure, it's not going to be boring. Like this year was, it had many ups and downs, but it sure as hell never gets boring. And like Paul said, I think it's going to be very interesting to see, to kind of come back at the end of next year and see what else has happened. And whatever happens between now and then, we can't predict, but it's sure as hell not going to be boring. This has been the Impact Marketing Podcast. I'm Shane Melach, and thank you for listening. Remember that you can go to impactpodcast.com to get show notes, links, and resources and so on this episode, as well as see all of our latest podcast episodes, a list of our most popular podcast episodes, a link to Stitcher Radio and iTunes where you can subscribe to our podcast, and of course you can also sign up to our mailing list. We've prepared a really cool case study for you that you can download if you sign up, and you will also be notified by email of future podcast episodes. That's impactpodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.